NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
One of my favorite books that I've read probably in the last decade was a book by Stephen Pressfield. And you may know Stephen Pressfield as the author of Bagger Vance. He also wrote The War of Art, which I highly recommend. But this was a fantastic book that he wrote called The Gates of Fire. It's historical fiction, but it's pretty accurate. And it tells the battle of the Greeks against the Persians at the Battle of Thermopylae. And if any of you have seen the movie 300, you probably have seen a movie version of kind of what this book is about. But for those of you who are not familiar with the history, let me just give you some brief background because I think it's so apt to what we do. In about 480 BC, there is a Persian emperor by the name of Xerxes I. And Xerxes and the Persian Empire have basically conquered the whole world. There is no military power, no military might that can stand up to the Persian army. Countries have tried, countries have failed. But in Xerxes' mind, the crown jewel for the dynasty is Greece. So he decides he's going to march his army to Greece and conquer it. Now, his father had tried before and failed, but he believes that his army is stronger now than it ever has been. It has more resources than it ever has had, and he is going to do the job this time. Unfortunately for Xerxes, he runs up against the current leader of a nation called Sparta, and that was King Leonidas. And King Leonidas basically unites the countries of Greece to fight this Persian battle. And at some point, and you remember this from the movie, it only comes down to about 300 folks that are going to defend this hot gate into essentially Greece. And these 300 men that stand and face this Persian army are fearless. They are tactically sound. And they battle the Persians for days on end, killing thousands of them to some of their tens. And only by being strong, smart, and tactical were they able to withstand this onslaught of people. Now, ultimately, they did lose, right? But it was only because there was a Greek, as legend tells it, that gave the Persian army a way around, a back door into Greece. And that's how the Persian army got around. So I think it's so apt when we look at that example. And by the way, ultimately, you know the story, which is that Greece did win. It was a naval battle later, and led in part by the spirit of Leonidas to stop that Persian army. They were buoyed against any further invasion, and they were ultimately able to repel that attack. You probably also know that within the next 100 years or so, Alexander the Great comes to power and eventually conquers the Persian Empire. But we go back to Leonidas and the Spartans and the stand that they took, and I think it's so apt for what we do because so many times we are outmatched in terms of the resources that the government is able to bring. If you ever look at a government witness list, they've got like 70 people listed on the document that are going to be called as witnesses. They've got people at their table that are going to run all their gear. They have all the resources together, and yet we are expected to do equally well in battle against them. I submit to you that that is possible, and that's possible because we are going to live by the Greek motto, the Spartan model, which is sweat more in training so you bleed less in battle. I'm not saying you won't bleed, you will, but I'm saying bleed less. And we're going to talk about some things today that are going to help us in that regard. Now, the mission today is really simple, which is I want to help you guys be the bookend now to what you've had all this time over the last couple days. And that is to take the theory that you have been learning and to distill this down into some practical ideas with technology that you can leave here with today and take with you to the courtroom. So it is my goal that you look at some software today and applications that I know you probably could acquire in 1 second if you wanted to, and how those may be useful. And then hopefully we're going to demonstrate and my hope, I'm going to experiment here a little bit with one of you guys, demonstrate some simple examples of use of that tool. So the goal is really to make sure that you are able to walk out of here and take all of that theory that we have and park it somewhere practical so that when you get to trial, you look good. Now, we live in an electronic age, right? E-discovery is everywhere. Sometimes it's really voluminous, sometimes it's not. It used to be that it was a box of material, but too often now when you talk about e-discovery, this is what you are facing. Sometimes a little disk that is no bigger than your finger contains documents that would fill a warehouse, and you've all seen that. And so while this presentation isn't about e-discovery, I know that you all recognize the problem that it presents in your practice. And so it's not as simple as sometimes pulling out a piece of paper from a box and saying, okay, this is the thing I'm going to use. It can be that sometimes, but not always. Too often what we find is that the way that people generate documents nowadays is electronic, right? Tablets and phones are everywhere. Computers are everywhere. Most of the way that we consume information and the way that we generate it begins in this electronic format. There was an ABA study that was done just a year ago, and they talked about lawyers and the use of their smartphones. And probably all of you have a smartphone in here. In fact, the majority of society does. Nowadays, in 2019, you'd be hard-pressed to find a lawyer that does not have a cell phone. Although I do always ask this question, is there someone here that has a flip phone that is willing to admit it? Okay, all right, that's great. Actually, I had a presentation in January, and someone admitted it, and I said, that's great. So anyway, but the majority of people right now are carrying smartphone devices. And as you can see from the statistic, although it's a little hard to make out, the majority of what we carry are iPhones. I am also going to assume that that is true for the majority of people here, although I do recognize that there are probably Android users as well. You use iOS on a regular basis, probably you use Android, but you probably also use a Windows computer, and you probably use a Mac computer. What I've tried to do over the course of this presentation is curate down some apps that I believe are going to be what I would call platform agnostic, not in all cases. And platform agnostic meaning you can use these tools on multiple devices, and that's the best way to go about doing what we're going to do for the structure of today. Now, you only have to look back a very, very short period of time to see how things have changed. And when Pope Francis came into, when you go to become a pope, they have a big meeting in Rome, right? And so everybody gathers to see what the cardinals have decided, okay? And in this particular instance, in 2013 versus 2005, when Pope Ratzinger was named pope, you can see the difference in the use of technology, right? I think a picture tells 1,000 words. So here you can kind of make out somebody with a cell phone, but you fast forward to 2013, which is now 6 years ago, and everybody's using a device, okay? When you get discovery, a lot of times it's not a gigabyte anymore. It's terabytes of stuff sometimes. And it's because it comes from all of this information. We have to be able to synthesize this information. We have to be able to analyze it. And we have to be able to figure out where is this going to fit into the structure of what we've been talking about today, which is cross-examination. How will I win my case if I can't find the information and I can't figure out how to use it in a way that makes sense? And so this is what we feel. So no matter what theory we have on what we want to do, I'm telling you, at the end of the day, when you sit down and go to write the cross, this is what you feel sometimes, because you're like, should I use paper? Should I use a tablet, a computer? You have all these things, but you can't organize them in a way that makes sense. And so when you go to trial, you do end up sometimes printing a lot of paper. And this is what it looks like as trial goes on, be it a 1-day, 2-day trial, be it a multi-week trial. You had hoped that it would be this, right? Because in your mind's eye, that's what it should be. But it's not. This is what it ends up looking. And then this is how we feel, right? We feel like we are falling and we are maybe not living up to our potential as a lawyer. We feel like we could be better, that we are somehow letting down our clients. It's not true. And after what I tell you here, I think that you will go back and feel energized and feel confident about what you're about to do. We talk about threes a lot, right? So this is the framework that I want to use for our discussion going forward here today. And this is the threefold method that I want to talk to you about. First, we have to change our mental framework. How many times, and this has happened to me too, I go to a conference, I'm really pumped up and excited about what's happened. I get on the plane, I'm thinking about how I'm going to change the world. I get back into the law practice, and oh my gosh, I fall back into the same patterns that I've had before. The same triggers come up, the same problems arise. I feel frustrated because I have all this knowledge that I just acquired, yet somehow I cannot implement it in my practice. So, the first thing that we have to change if we're going to be better with what we've learned today is our mental framework, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The second thing that we have to change, and some of you may already be using this, but we need a tool for collecting documents and ideas. And I'm not talking about e-discovery now, okay? I'm talking about specifically stuff that you're going to use to gather your information and the frameworks that we've talked about here, the chapter method, right? Or whatever method you want to use, but for cross-examination. How will I take these things into an electronic format and use them at trial in electronic format? Then the third thing we're going to touch on here is the presentation tool for cross-examination. There are so many things that you could look at nowadays. Everybody has developed an app. Your cousin's developed an app. Your aunt developed an app. Everybody has come up with something, right? So what we have is shiny object syndrome. We think that the next thing that someone talks about is going to be the greatest thing. It's going to solve all our problems. It's not. And you know this to be true from your own experience. If you just stick with and persevere on one tool, okay, you will know what its limitations are, and you will know what its advantages are. It may not do everything in the world, but most of the surveys say that when you get an app or you get a program, you don't use 100% of what the program could do. Think about your own experience with Word or with Outlook. There are all these ribbons and buttons. It does amazing stuff. But when you go to practice, you just open up a new doc and start typing. Maybe you cut and paste, maybe you underline, but really the basics of what you need to do to get through your practice is probably limited to about 10% or more of what these applications can do. Therefore, we are going to look at some simple tools that don't require a lot of training. Okay, let's talk first about this mental framework. Now, there are two awesome books that I want to recommend to you to help you change your framework. And I find these both to be very helpful for knowledge workers, which is what we are. And that's a term that I borrowed from David Allen, who wrote the book Getting Things Done. And if you've never read that book, I recommend that to you also. But the first book is by an author called Cal Newport. And Cal Newport is an assistant professor of mathematics and computer science, I believe at Georgetown. And his book is fascinating because it talks about the dilemma that we all find ourselves in now as knowledge workers, which is that we live in a time of distraction. So when you go to sit down, there's a knock on the door, right? Someone says, hey, can I have a few minutes of your time? You get distracted. And studies say that it takes at least 15 minutes to get back into the work that you're doing, right? But the other great distraction is email and text messages and social media. All the things that you carry around with you in your pocket are potential distractions for you. And every time the phone goes off in your pocket, even if you have it on silent, every time it rings, it buzzes, every time you're standing in line, every time you just say, oh, I'm bored, I look at my phone, that is a distraction that keeps you from doing your best work. Most of the books that you read, most of the great treatises that you've read, they're not emails. I don't care how much time you spend working on the email, that's not going to be the great work that gets remembered. It's important for communication, and Cal Newport would define that sometimes as shallow work, things that need to move the ball forward, right? But the great work that we do, the things that really require our mind, that's where we get paid. That's what we get paid to do. We have to have the time to do it, and we have to be willing to dive into deep work to do it. And that is undistracted, focused time. It's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for everybody I know, because there was a time when you could do it. You could sit and work for an hour or more because the phone wasn't ringing, there wasn't something buzzing in your pocket, etc. But that has changed. Even folks that, as an initial starting point in their life, were very focused individuals, the phones and things that we use now, the electronic devices, have distracted us. You only have to check yourself at a restaurant and see how many times people are looking down at their phone. In this seminar, how many times are you checking your email? And the one thing about getting into flow, okay, which Mr. Posner talked about yesterday, and this is a great book about it. It's by an author, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He talks about the fact that time seems to disappear in the flow state. And you feel a sense of dopamine hitting you as you accomplish tasks. But the other thing that gives you a shot of dopamine is the phone buzzing and checking email and all that stuff. So I challenge you now, if you are going to do great work, if you are going to take what you have learned here today, you have to challenge your mindset. You have to be able to put yourself into a deep work state that will really allow you to get into these tactics that we're going to talk about. Okay, so we take this framework, this idea that everybody has talked about here today, and we are all lawyers and attorneys talking about these ideas. But you know where the real money is? What do jurors really think about that stuff? Because we are talking to each other. It's kind of like me when I talk to my firm about marketing. I'm not a marketer. So we sit around and we talk about what should we do to market, and we're just all talking to ourselves, right? So there's value in people that have done cases, but I think there is also value in studies that have looked at what jurors think. And there was a great study that was done in 2018. I like the fact that it's a law review article that's found in Cornell Law Review. I love the fact that it's 2018 because that means it is recent data that has been collected. Now, these two folks, collected data from 500 jurors who served on a federal district court trial in Chicago, Illinois from 2011 to 2017. So it includes in the study some verbatim comments that the jurors provided in response to the questions that they were asked. You know what that is when you have that kind of information? That's gold. That is absolute gold. Because the people that you are presenting to, you get a chance to see what they're thinking. And I think that's just perfect. So they asked 5 questions, but I think 4 are essential to the stuff that we're talking about here today. So you list the 3 things that you liked about what the trial folks did. You list 3 things that the lawyers did that you didn't like. What would you have liked to have seen them do differently? And any other comments about the trial. Those 4 questions, I think, are things that when you get to the end of trial and you're able to talk to jurors, that's the kind of stuff that you want to ask them. Is there anything about what I did that you found offensive? Was it effective? Because that helps you prepare for the next trial. So here's what they talked about with technology, and this is what we're going to focus on. And there are a bunch of other things that they talked about in the study, so I commend it to your reading. I will say that the other interesting note from the jurors is they liked lawyers who appeared to be organized. Okay, so technology is going to help us with that. But 35 jurors listed attorneys' effective use of technology as positive, right? And then the 12 listed it at the lack of the use of technology as being a negative, okay? So they expect us to use technology in our presentations. Here are some of the things they said. Why couldn't the defense use laptops to present evidence like the prosecutors? Oh, gosh, that is painful, right? Would have liked to have seen the defense have their things on a computer, better to view. Like the defense's use of technical equipment, like the attorneys put visuals on the screen. So those things are helpful. Would have liked to have seen the attorneys operate computers better. This gets back to the concept of simplicity that I'm talking about. So we know from the study, and there are other studies that are very similar to this, we know that jurors want us to use technology. They want us to present to them in a way that seems familiar. They watch TV, they look at social media, they're on YouTube. Those things resonate with them. If you can resonate with them in the same way, you are going to be that much more ahead. And it only takes a little bit, as you're going to see. Okay, so the first thing we should talk about is collecting ideas should be easy. So Larry Posner talked about the idea that you want to think about what you're going to do for cross, right? So we live in a digital age, and so we have access to tools. And the first one and concept that I want to talk to you about is just the idea of a mind map. How many people are familiar with a mind map? Okay, if you have never used one, I would highly recommend it. This is effective for me because I am a non-linear thinker. I tend to have sporadic thoughts about things, and so my mind kind of jumps. So if I could commit 15 minutes or so to sit down and begin free-forming ideas, then I'm not committed to a linear structure. And the problem with a linear structure is if you think about something, you get to add it back in, it begins to look messy somehow, something about the way our brains works doesn't like that. With mind mapping, and specifically this app, MindNode, which is an iOS app, we have a chance to free-form our thinking in a very non-structured way. So I put this example up, which is very hard to see, I know, but as I was thinking about what I would talk to you guys about, I used a mind map, and I used MindNode to create this map. And some of the things that I have put in here are not being used, but when I sat down for 15 or 20 minutes at a time, I would attack this mind map, and I would just let my thoughts go. I would put no judgment on what I was thinking. I could always throw out the idea later. I would just be a madman thinker and put down everything that I could think of. That strategy of releasing your mind to a non-linear map allows you to come up with things that you probably wouldn't thought of before. And MindNode is great because it exists in the Mac OS universe. It also exists on your iPhone. It does not exist for Android or Windows, but there are other apps that are that way. So mind mapping as a technique to capture at least the initial thoughts that we have about how we are going to attack this story is a very effective way to do it, and I would recommend MindNode. There is another app that also exists, and it's called iThoughts, which is another mind mapping tool. It exists on the Windows platform. It's about $49. Its advantage is that it also exists on the iOS platform and the Mac platform. So again, you have this platform agnostic tool that you can use in multiple scenarios. Another technique then I want to talk to you about as it relates to I'm losing my train of thought. As it relates to focusing, right? I'm non-focused. Has anybody ever heard of the phrase "eat the frog"? Okay, so this concept is from Mark Twain, and essentially he's saying, look, if you got to eat a frog in the morning, then what else worse could happen to you? And so when you apply that to the work concept, my thought has been that the morning hours are the golden hours. Why? Because everybody's sleeping. I've got kids. I've got 3 kids. People are sleeping. If I get to work, I'm already immediately distracted by folks and emails, etc. So if I can get something done of great importance, or at least start to work on something, like a trial that I have coming up down the road, right, for just a few minutes each day, the volume of work that I put in sometimes really translates to quality of ideas, and that's what you want to do. So if a cross is really getting you down and you think you've got a difficult thing to try to overcome, break it down into chunks. As they say, how do you eat an elephant, right? 1 bite at a time. That's what we're doing here. And I want to suggest a low methodology to use that, to do that, and that's the Pomodoro technique. Has anybody ever used that? Okay, so if you wake up in the morning, and it doesn't really matter what time you wake up, but this needs to be the first thing that you're going to do if you're going to tackle a cross, okay? You are going to do 25 minutes of focused work. You're going to set a timer. And the Pomodoro technique was developed in Italy by a student who was looking for a way to get through his doctorate degree. And so he said, my gosh, this seems so overwhelming. How can I tackle this issue? I'm just going to do 25 minutes at a time. And it turns out that's an effective amount for the brain to focus on. It's not longer than 25. It's not shorter than 25. You can do anything for 25 minutes, especially knowledge work. But the reason this becomes so difficult is that if you wait till you get to work and say, I'm going to do this midday, it's not going to happen because you're getting distracted by people. Things are taking over your time. You do it in the morning, 25 minutes, work on cross with MindNode or iThoughts, you will begin to see progress that you can translate into other areas of the story that you're trying to build. And over the course of time, because it's only 25 minutes, if that's the most important thing you have to do, when you get ready to build the chapters and the pages and the story that you want to tell, you will be surprised at the number of ideas you have captured. And you cannot say to yourself, I will remember this later. You won't. You won't remember it. That's just the way it goes. You might remember one thing, but not all the ideas that you're collecting. So we got to set aside time, and that's changing the mental framework and capturing things, okay? Now, let's talk about a tool for building the story, because we talked about that. We talked about a lot of things that you want to do, right? But how do we get that into something that we can translate later to actual product, okay? I will suggest to you, first of all, that when it comes to documents and building your story and the tool that you're going to use, the PDF is king. I know there are multiple formats. There's Word, Excel, PST files for email, blah, blah, blah. Everything that you do should be eventually converted to a PDF. And why? Because it's stable, it's easy to annotate, and it looks like paper. So if you're going to present to a jury, this thing that you're showing them, it may have started as a PST file, an email, right? But at the end of the day, it's just an email on paper, and that's what you want to be able to show them. It looks familiar, and you're able to annotate it, which we're going to see in a minute is very key. The other issue that arises with PDFs, and if you don't get these from the government in this way, you should do it yourself. You have to OCR the documents. OCR means optimal character recognition. Is anybody familiar with that term? Okay, you all should be familiar with this term because it makes your documents searchable. So if you've got a large PDF that has like 1,000 pages, if it's not OCR'd, you can't search across that document. It has to be OCR'd either through Adobe Acrobat or some other program in order to allow you to input search terms that would get you to where you want to go in the document a lot faster. And that will help you at trial. That will help you as you build your story, because if you're looking for documents that contain the name Agent Smith and you have OCR'd it, when you type in Agent Smith, you might get 50 hits that return, and you're able to start with those documents. And that's a good way to go about it. But if you don't have OCR, the document's pretty much useless as a PDF, in my opinion. Okay, so how many of you have heard of OneNote? Okay, good. If you have a Windows computer, everybody has OneNote, okay? This is an amazing program. Amazing. It's a digital notebook. You have it on your computer. You've probably seen the little N, and you've been like, that stands for nope, I'm not going to use it. No, we're going to use this thing. First of all, because we're looking at practical and tactical, this is free. That means when you leave here, you could use it. You could use it right now. Maybe some of you are taking notes as I'm talking in OneNote, okay? It is also platform agnostic, and when I talk about that, I mean that it's capable of going across multiple platforms. It's got integration with other applications, not only the Word suite, but other document type review applications can send stuff to OneNote, and you can begin to collect some of your documents into this document cross-examination management tool, okay? And it provides a digital structure that's familiar to us, which is a digital notebook. Everybody probably knows about tabs and pages, and so this mirrors that. And in that way, I think for someone that is unfamiliar with technology, this is a great tool to start with so that you can kind of pick things up very easily. And it's got a sync function, which is really good. So this is kind of how a notebook would look. And I know this picture is a little small, but you can see that you've got text here. I've got annotated writing on here. On the top, if you can see that, I've got these tabs that appear, right? And these can be the chapters of the story that we've talked about, right? And then within that chapter now, I have pages that are on the right-hand side, okay? And those pages can be the cross of an individual. And if we're going to do one page per cross, as we've talked about, then that's a great start to have that available to me, because if I'm going through and trying to put this together, I can just click on these links and be in the page immediately. Okay, so here's just a small basic cross that took me maybe, 10 or 15 minutes to put together, right? So I didn't even hit my Pomodoro. But you can see here that we're talking about the arrest of Peter Pan, okay? And so I've got these now chapters. My client didn't resist arrest. Now, I've got these questions that are listed here, and I can come back to this anytime I want. I can come back to this on multiple platforms. If I'm in the airport, as I'll show you in just a second, I can click on this and be in the document immediately. But Shazzie, you say, what about the fact that we want to attach documents to the cross so that we know what's going on? I got you covered. I've got you covered. So in this particular instance, what I noticed was, and I want to talk about, the map that existed for Neverland, okay? So I have, as I'm reviewing my information, the map that I want to attach to the cross-examination of Captain Hook. So all I do is I print from, in this instance, I'm in just my normal Windows Explorer pane, but you can do this from multiple apps, okay? I print to OneNote, okay? So if I print it to OneNote from the tablet or whatever I'm working with, I don't have to go anywhere, leave anything. It's so fast. And then OneNote, because it's a really great program, says, where would you like to park that document? Okay, so I've gone from print to now, where will I park it? Now, let's say I've got a lot of cross-examinations that I'm working on. I can pick any number of places that I want it to appear. But in this particular instance, I've placed it in this particular chapter because that's the one that's relevant to the cross that I'm working on. So now, this document went from print to where do I park it to now it's in my cross-examination file, okay, for my story. Now I say, I wonder what I need to remember about this document because I'm reviewing it. I think it's awesome. And I may come back to this a week from now, maybe it's a month from now, I don't know. But I should take some notes, right? The great thing about OneNote is that you can annotate by pen, and by pen I mean I use a Surface pen right here to make these handwritten notes, but I can also annotate with just regular text. I just type it in. So if I don't want to handwrite something, that's okay. I'm going to type it in. And those are just some things I'm thinking about with respect to the Neverland map, right? I draw a circle around this guy, Captain Hook and Mr. Sneed, right? And that's the stuff I kind of want to come back and remember. I got to record it because I won't remember it. And then I look at where I'm going to talk about where the arrest occurred, and I put a circle around that. And here's what I want to look at for that. So now, right, I've done this, I've been working, et cetera, et cetera. You see me at the airport because we're both about to fly out, and we say, hey, that was a great presentation. You working on it anymore? I can, because I just pull up my iPhone, and there it is, because OneNote has synced to it. So as I'm getting on the plane, and you say, I meant to tell you, you should really think about that. Fine, I will park it in that document as I'm getting on the plane. And I've just pulled up my cross-examination on my phone as I'm getting on the plane or sitting in the airport. And that is the beauty of capture, and that is using technology to your advantage. Not for distraction, but for productivity. If you can train yourself to use and stick with this particular app, and I've chosen this app because it's got other potential here, but it is a great app for integration and allows you to be mobile. Okay, so another app that you can use that's on the Surface is Drawboard. It is also good for PDFs. It's about $30 a year for a pro subscription, but it does essentially the same thing, which it allows you to take handwritten notes. And if you like taking handwritten notes, it can be a little strange to take it on a glass tablet, but it works. And then you can send this also to OneNote. Okay, let's get to the presentation tool, because I'm running a little bit out of time. How am I doing on time, by the way? Okay, all right. Now, I want to talk about a presentation tool. Okay, and one of the things that I'm thinking about for practical and tactical is you cannot pay hundreds of dollars a year for a tool that you don't really know if you need it or not, okay? And some of the subscriptions to some of these services like Trial Director and Sanctions are super expensive. They're, $600, $700, $800, right? That seems very out of reach. Plus there's a maintenance fee usually that attaches to those programs. They're very useful, okay? They are very powerful, but I want you to go back to what I told you about the 10% that you're really gonna use. So, because of that, I'm recommending this program, TrialPad. Now, has anybody ever used TrialPad? Oh, this is wonderful. Okay, so, TrialPad is only an iPad app, okay? And we're going to look at it here in just a second. But, so that's the downfall, right? If you have a Windows computer, you're not going to be able to use this. But what I like about TrialPad is that for presentation purposes, all I have to do, and there are some other things that I need, but all I really have to do is take this with me to court. My documents are on this iPad. I'm not lugging in boxes, and this is especially true if we're going to look at a case that doesn't involve thousands of documents, okay? That you might need some help with. But if you've got a few documents, or maybe 100 or so, this is going to be an excellent tool for us for cross-examination. Some things that you may need to make this work, you're definitely going to need this HDMI adapter, which looks like this, okay? You need this because it plugs into the iPad, and then the HDMI connection is what you're going to use to plug into a smart courtroom, or you're going to use an HDMI cable to plug into an Apple TV if you wanted to do wireless presentation, okay? But really, you just need this cord on the left-hand side, which runs about $40 at an Apple store, and you need an HDMI cable. Of course, you need an iPad. An iPencil would also be helpful, and I'll show you why in just a second. So why am I saying TrialPad is going to be a useful app for us? Well, first, the prosecutors, and I see some people are from San Diego, so they can tell me if this is true or not, but the prosecutors are using this information to present their case.
The San Diego County District Attorney's Office is going high-tech in the courtroom. Well, they're the first district-wide office in the country to use an app to present evidence electronically. New at 7 o'clock, 10 News reporter Janet Kwok reveals why prosecutors are turning to tablets to try cases.
Items that were taken.
Deputy DA David Grappelon's skills as a prosecutor helped him win a recent robbery case, but he admits
The jury got a really good sense of how the incident happened.
technology was on his side.
It really is a small, compact little unit that allows us to present a variety of evidence, a variety of media, really at the touch of a finger.
He's now training other prosecutors how to use an iPad app called TrialPad, which allows attorneys to build e-exhibits.
You can pull out that area if you want to make it a little bit closer for the jury.
Getting creative on how cases, clients, and crimes are presented.
I can bring the area up and I can rotate the image by using my fingers to allow the witness to better describe what area they want, and then I can even tilt it or pan it.
For example, you can compare diagrams, even draw on some pictures and blow it up, making it more engaging for jurors and witnesses.
We're no longer limited by space. We're no longer limited by static exhibits.
The tablet show and tell is in response to a San Diego Superior Court ruling banning the use of poster boards, except for murder trials. With room running out to store the bulky exhibits, more prosecutors can expect to start training on this soon.
Some of those trial attorneys who've been around a long time, they barely got used to using a computer. Now we're giving them an iPad with touchscreens.
Janet Kwok, 10 News.
Sign of the times. The app isn't meant to replace any physical evidence such as weapons. By the way, 10 News has learned the U.S. Attorney's Office will soon be using this app as well.
Okay, well, who knows? Physical evidence, come on. But let me tell you this, that even though the U.S. Attorney's offices may want to use them, there are still folks among the U.S. attorneys or, any prosecutor's office that also fear technology. So if you are able to embrace this and do some of the simple things I'm talking about, then I think that you have an advantage with the jury that the prosecutors will think is magic, okay? So the second reason I'm recommending TrialPad as our app for presentation is that it's inexpensive compared to the other trial software. I said it's $129 in the App Store, which is not cheap as far as apps go, but as far as trial presentation software goes, it's excellent. It's portable and it's lightweight. If you're like me and you're out and about all the time, you're traveling, you want to be mobile with your documents. I don't like to be tied to the computer at my desk. I want to have my exhibits with me. If I'd like to do it on the plane, I'd like to work on the plane. If I'm at a kid's swim meet, I'd like to do it there if I want. Just pull up a visual image of where you may be when you want to work on something, and that's what TrialPad allows you to do. As I said before, it's got good integration with other document management systems, or not document management systems, but other document review apps. These are just some of them: Notability, Readle Documents, and then PDF Expert. Dropbox is free, except you have to pay for a larger subscription. But the main one that I'm talking about, because I'm trying to curate the experience for you, is OneNote. And OneNote will send documents into TrialPad, okay? So we have a free document kind of management cross-examination tool, and we can send that into the TrialPad app. So it's easy to use. I'm going to test this theory here in just a second. And then we're going to use this for cross-examination. This is what is going to be our tool. So when you first open up TrialPad, this is what you're presented with. So in many ways, it looks like an electronic folder that you would tap on, right? And you would have this on your computer. So you can see already the interface is super simple. There aren't a bunch of buttons. This is it. So you double tap on a case to get into it, and then you're presented with this essential screen, okay? So what's important about this, and this is not necessarily structured, but you can create folders if you want to put things in certain things, and I'll show you that in just a second, but to put documents into certain folders for cross-examination. But it's a structure that allows you to see a thumbnail of the document. So this is great for photos. If you know what the photo looks like, you would see a thumbnail image of it. You don't have to know what the file name is necessarily, although if you get into larger docs, that's what you would need to do. But you can just see a thumbnail of it, and you can click on that thumbnail pretty easily. So in this particular instance, I've created a folder up here on the upper left-hand corner, Cross-X of Agent Smith. I will put documents that I'm going to present at trial on cross-examination into that folder, okay? So I would take some Pan documents, some Peter Pan stuff, right? I would send it to TrialPad, and I would put it, if I want, into that cross-ex folder, and I'm going to use that for my cross-examination. Okay. As far as what the documents look like when you bring them up on TrialPad, this is what they look like. Looks like, again, we're working with PDFs, so it looks like a normal thing that you're using, right? But in this scenario, because this is our trial presentation tool, this is how you get the document in front of the jury. You're not putting it on the Elmo. They don't call it the Elmo anymore. It's like a high visibility, blah, blah, blah. But you know what I'm talking about, right? You don't slap it down on there. You're going with your electronic document, and this is how you're going to present it to the jury. You can also, for longer documents, because you don't want to scroll as you're looking through, you can bookmark documents. In this particular instance, this document's like 69 pages long. If I have a witness that I want to cross and I want to get right to 609, I have it bookmarked, and I will tap on the bookmark, and I will get there right away so we can begin the cross at the point where I want to begin it, and I'm not wasting time flipping through an electronic document, nor am I putting paper on the Elmo to try to flip through things and find it. Okay, so they're great for using documents with a witness. This is what this is designed to do. Okay, this is what you don't want to do, but we're trying things, right? Okay, let's try again. So we are pulling up the document. I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 12. Okay, Officer Smith, this is the document that you said. Thank you. Thank you. This is the gun that was recovered from the scene, yes. And although you said that the gun that you recovered had a square barrel, I want to show you the gun that actually got checked into evidence. Sir, the barrel of that gun is round, isn't it? Yes. Okay. So, slight snafu, right? But that's essentially a call out, right? And you've seen that on multiple things. So now, I'm going to have you, on this particular document, call out whatever you'd like to call out.
Okay.
And so you take it.
Hit call out.
Mm-hmm.
Hit call out.
And then hold the pencil and then just drag around. Okay. Okay, so that's a call-out tool, and it also comes in very useful for, let's say you have documents that you're looking at, okay? And you can make this larger, right, by pinching and zooming. Okay, now call out a paragraph, so you're going to hit call out.
This is awesome.
Mm-hmm. And just call out whatever you'd like to call out.
Okay, I'd like to draw your attention to same page we've been talking about, lines 16 through 19. Did I ask you this question? Did you give me this answer?
Right. Now, we can even make this more powerful because we say, you know what, I really want to call your attention to the fact that you said the word 5. So the other tool that we have available to us is the highlight tool. So then we do the same thing. And 5 is highlighted on our call out. So with larger documents, you can begin to call things out. You can begin to highlight them. If you have perhaps, let's say something about this crane hook and the way that the mechanism failed is important, but you don't want to necessarily call it out. You can also do a laser pointer, okay? And you say, sir, isn't it true that this is the mechanism right here that failed, okay? It's so easy because I'm just looking at a document, I'm working with a pencil, it's just so easy to do. And so then if you say, okay, so we can agree then, right, sir, now I've clicked on the pen, and this is nice for the jury to be able to see, right? So you can see, and I can change the pen. Let's make it red. This is the mechanism, sir, that failed, isn't it? Yes, it is. Okay. So we can agree that that was the reason that that crane fell, or whatever the cross would be for that particular thing. So in like 2 minutes, okay, you have seen call out, highlight, pen, and laser, right? And we're doing it in like a minute.
This is awesome.
Okay, so now, now let's say, as we were talking about yesterday, we were talking about invoices. I remember we were talking about comparing invoices. You can also compare documents. So in this particular instance, I've got the document up, but let's say for whatever reason, there was a gun that was hidden in there, okay? Now, in this particular instance, I'm comparing, this could be documents, right? But I'm comparing now photographs. Maybe it's of the scene, maybe it's of the evidence, the ballistics, whatever it is. But again, you can go back and still do your call out, okay? And you're good to go. Okay, so that is essentially trial pad presenting at trial, right? So you can have snafus, but in general, the document itself, the app itself and the way that it operates is going to be very, very stable. So if you go back and you say, I'd like to look at a document where they were talking about this gun, you can pull it up, okay? You can go back to a single document. And let's say you want to stop presenting. You can just go to a blank screen while you go to maybe the next page in the document, and you're still talking, and you're doing your thing, and et cetera, right? But the first page that you saw on that was the first page of the document. Now I'm coming back, and I want to do a specific call out on another paragraph. When I come back again, and I bring up the document now it's at a second page. I've maybe bookmarked it to a place where I want to go. I'm going to use the call out tool on the app, okay? And I get a chance to pull that up in such a way that they get a chance to see it up close and personal. So if you work with this system, you can have thoughts about what you will do for your chapters of your cross. You can then take those things and put them into OneNote, and you've seen the way that that operates. And then you take those documents and you begin to place them in TrialPad. Does that make sense? As a presentation tool, the only downside, I think, is probably that the tool itself is only on iOS. So if you don't have an iPad, this might not work for you, but we're talking about trying to do things that are easy and simple. Most people have iPads. In this particular instance, I'm rolling with an iPad Pro. This is a couple years old. The processor on the iPad Pro is just a little bit better, but and I've never tried it with a regular iPad, but the pencil support also was important to me at the time that I bought the iPad. Now on regular iPads, they also have pencil support. So you might be able to do this with a regular iPad. If you want, you could also buy the 12.1 inch or whatever that one is. It's a little bit bigger, a little easier to work with. I just have the smaller one because it's more portable.
That's why I've got the bigger one.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so when you work with that structure, that's what will get you, I think, into a practical and tactical way to actually use software to put things together. And I think the more you work with it, it's like anything, you cannot wait until the day before trial to try to put this together. You have to work with it well in advance. But if you do that and you work with it and you get used to how it functions, how you set it up, etc., I think you'll find that this will be a really, really good tool for you guys. So I thank you for your time this afternoon. I wish you safe travels.